All right, so get ready because today we are diving deep into a relationship dilemma. And this one really set the internet on fire. We're talking about a viral Am I the A-hole post. You know those online forums where people basically go to ask if they were wrong in a situation? Well, this one involves a husband who is thinking about divorcing his wife after she called him a loser for having a gaming room. Yeah, you heard that right. And the response is online. Wild. So we are going to unpack all of this and see if we can understand, like, what went wrong here.
Well, what's so fascinating about this post is how it kind of went beyond just the whole gaming aspect. It sparked this massive debate online about respect and personal space and honestly how societal expectations play into relationships, which I think is really
Oh,
interesting.
I know. I mean, when I first saw this post, my jaw, like, hit the floor. A gaming room leading to divorce. That's intense. So to give everyone the full picture, the original poster, we'll just call him OP, is a man who is juggling a PhD program and a job. Oh, and he enjoys video games and board games enough to actually have a separate room for them.
And it's important to point out that OP mentions that he only actually plays like a few hours a week. So it's not like this is his whole life, 24/7.
Right, he's not living in a virtual world all the time. But here's the real kicker. His wife never really seemed bothered by his gaming before. Then they had this huge argument, which wasn't even about the games. It was about OP being really busy with his thesis and not really having a lot of time for her, especially, around Valentine's Day.
Oh, Valentine's Day, that holiday that can be either super romantic or a total relationship landmine.
Yeah, for sure. And in this case, it seems like it triggered a major, major explosion. So during the argument, OP's wife called him, get this, a loser and a man-child for having a gaming room,
Oof.
right?
I mean, that's gotta hurt. This is way more than just a disagreement. Those words are like attacking his character. In fact, that kind of communication is what relationship expert John Gottman calls contempt, which he considers one of the four horsemen of the relationship apocalypse.
Okay, the four horsemen. That sounds pretty ominous. Tell me more about this.
Okay, so Gottman's research has identified four major communication patterns that are like seriously predictive of divorce. Criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and this one, contempt. Contempt is especially damaging because it communicates this like sense of disgust and superiority.
So basically, calling your husband a loser for having a hobby definitely falls into that category. So no wonder OP was completely devastated.
Right, and his reaction, he immediately suggested a divorce. That's how deeply those words affected him.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about the internet's reaction to all of this. The comments on this post were all over the place. Some people were totally siding with OP, saying that he deserves respect and that his wife was totally out of line. Others were urging him to reconsider, saying he's overreacting.
Yeah, that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. All these different opinions. It says a lot about the different ways we all view marriage and compromise, and how we think about personal interests within a relationship.
Right? And there's one comment that really stuck with me. It said, you marry the person you have, not the person you hope they'll become. And I don't know, that just felt really profound and kind of sad in this situation.
Yeah, it's true. It really highlights this crucial point. You can't change your partner, at least not their core self. That's often a recipe for disaster, honestly. I think relationships work best when they're based on acceptance, not on trying to force someone into a mold they don't fit in.
It's true. And this actually reminds me of a comment from someone whose ex used to make these subtle digs about their writing hobby.
Oh, tell me more about that. I think this could be really insightful.
So this person loved to write, but their partner, while, seemingly supportive, would always drop these little comments about how it was a waste of time or that no one would ever actually read their work. And, at first it seemed harmless, but as time went on, those little comments really started to chip away at their confidence. It wasn't until after the relationship ended that they realized just how toxic that behavior was and how controlling.
It's amazing how those seemingly small criticisms can actually be like a form of control and manipulation, especially when it's repeated over and over again. It can make someone question everything about themselves and their passions.
It really makes you wonder if OP missed some signs along the way, right? Did his wife always harbor like these negative feelings about his gaming? Or was her outburst just like a heat of the moment kind of thing?
That's the million-dollar question. And this is why open and honest communication is so important in a relationship. Bottling up all that resentment, it just leads to explosions later on. If she had some concerns about the gaming, why didn't she talk to him directly before it got to this point?
That's so true. It makes you think, like, was OP even aware of how his wife was feeling until she just lost it? It makes you think about ourselves. Are we accidentally, like, contributing to problems in our relationships? by not being open and honest about, what we need and how we feel.
All the time. We think our partner should just automatically know how we feel, but that's just setting everyone up for like miscommunication and resentment. And good communication, that's key, but it means both people have to express themselves and like actually listen to each other.
Absolutely. Speaking of different perspectives, another commenter brought up this really interesting question. Was OP's wife actually upset about the gaming itself? Or was it more about her feeling, I don't know, neglected and like they weren't spending quality time together?
That is a really important question
Right.
because it's totally possible that the gaming room became like a symbol for a much bigger issue, like a lack of connection or attention. Maybe the gaming wasn't the actual problem, but more of a symptom of something else going on in the relationship.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like sometimes we lapped onto specific things to complain about when the real issue is like way deeper and harder to explain.
Exactly. And that's why understanding the four horsemen can be so helpful. If we can recognize those patterns in ourselves, in our partners, then we have a better chance of like dealing with the real problems before they get out of control.
So let's go back to the whole gaming thing for a minute, because this situation sparked a huge debate about whether gaming is inherently childish. Some people were super quick to judge OP, while others were defending it as like a totally normal adult hobby.
Right. It's so interesting how this one couple's issue turned into this big discussion about societal norms and expectations, like what's an acceptable hobby for an adult. And we all have biases about what's considered mature, and these biases can affect our relationships.
Oh, for sure. We have this idea that certain hobbies are only for kids. And if adults do them, then they're not mature or responsible. But like, who gets to decide that? And why do we put these limits on each other?
I think it's worth thinking about where those beliefs actually come from and how they might be showing up in our own relationships. Like, are we judging our partner's hobbies because we genuinely have concerns? Or are we letting, societal pressure tell us what's okay?
That's a good point. Okay, I want to bring up another big theme that kept coming up in the comments. Compromise. Some people were like really adamant that OP should just give up gaming altogether for his marriage. Others felt like he shouldn't have to sacrifice part of himself to make his wife happy.
That's the constant battle in relationships, right?
Yeah,
Finding that balance between compromising and being your own person.
exactly. On one hand, relationships need compromise. We can't always get our way. We have to be willing to adjust to make our partners happy.
But on the other hand, we shouldn't have to completely abandon who we are to make a relationship work.
Right, so where do we have on the line? How do we find that sweet spot?
Well, I think it starts with, open communication, like we've been talking about. Both people have to express their needs and expectations in a respectful way, and they need to listen to each other, even if they disagree.
It sounds like finding that balance takes a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah, it really does. It's about knowing what you need, communicating it, and working together to find solutions that feel fair to both people.
So, going back to OP and his wife, do you think they have a chance to find that balance? Or is the damage already done?
That's a tough one. It's hard to say for sure without knowing more about their history together, but from what we've seen, there are some serious red flags.
Like what?
Well, the wife's use of, like, contempt, her unwillingness to apologize, her dismissing how he feels, all of that points to a lack of respect in the relationship.
And respect is like the foundation of everything, right?
Absolutely, it's the basis of trust and connection. Without respect, it's really hard to build a loving relationship where both people can be themselves.
So, I mean, given everything we've talked about, do you think there's any hope for this marriage? Or is it, headed straight for divorce court?
Well, it's not impossible for couples to, work through situations like this, but it would take a lot of effort from both people. They'd have to really understand what went wrong and figure out how to rebuild that trust.
Okay, so like, what would that even look like? I mean, how do you even begin to fix something like this?
Well, the first thing the wife needs to do is like really own up to what she said, like a real, genuine apology. And I don't mean a sorry you feel that way kind of thing. She has to acknowledge that she hurt him and really show that she regrets it.
Right, because those non-apologies just make things worse.
Exactly. A real apology is about taking responsibility and like validating the other person's feelings. It's the first step to rebuilding trust.
And what about OP? Like, is there anything he can do to help with this?
He can definitely tell her how he feels, how much her words hurt him, and why that lack of apology is so damaging. But he needs to do it in a calm and assertive way.
But he shouldn't have to, like, apologize for his gaming room. right? Or for enjoying his
Oh,
hobbies.
absolutely not. Those are part of who he is. And a healthy relationship is one where both people have space for their own interests.
Okay, so let's say they get past the apology. What happens next?
Then they need to dig deeper, figure out what led to this fight in the first place. What are their needs?
Right, like maybe she's feeling neglected or like his hobbies are more important to him than she is.
Exactly. These are tough conversations to have. And sometimes it's helpful to have a third party, someone neutral.
Like a therapist.
Yeah, exactly. Couples therapy can be a safe space to talk about these things.
Okay, so let's say they go to therapy and they figure out those root causes. Then what?
Then it's about finding solutions, and that means compromise and communication and, being willing to adjust to make each other happy.
So like in this case, maybe OP could agree to like limit his gaming on certain days, or they could schedule regular date nights.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to respect each other's needs, and it's a constant process. Relationships take effort.
This all sounds like a lot of work, honestly. I mean, is it even realistic to expect couples to put in that much effort? Especially after all this.
It's true, relationships do require effort. The real question is it worth it for them? Do they still love each other enough to want to fight for it? That's something only they can decide.
This whole conversation has been so insightful. We've talked about like the psychology of relationships, communication, compromise. I feel like I have a better understanding of how to deal with, difficult situations.
And I hope our listeners feel the same way. This AITA post was about one couple, but the themes are universal. We all deal with love and partnership and, growing as individuals within a relationship.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this?
I'd say think about your own relationships. Are you respecting your partner? Are you communicating openly and honestly? And are you both putting in the effort to make it work?
Those are some really powerful questions, and if anyone wants to explore these ideas further, I highly recommend checking out Shauna Polidge's YouTube channel. She has so much great content on relationships and personal growth.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, Voices of the Soul, for more deep dives like this. We cover all kinds of topics, from self-discovery to spirituality to, the meaning of life.
That's right. Hit that subscribe button and join us. And until next time, keep diving deep. COA.